In 2024, I introduce you to Shelve It or Scrap It, a monthly reading challenge where I read randomly selected books from these stacks on the floor of my library. The goal was to get all of the books from the floor onto my shelves or scrapped into my unhaul pile by the end of the year. We started 2024 with 70 books in the stacks, but despite shelving 35 books and scrapping 57 books throughout the year, holding 64 less books than in 2023 and thus making a positive dent in my own TBR as a whole, we actually ended the year with one more book in the stacks than when we started. So in 2025, I have to up my game. The rules remain the same, but I now have to read the same amount of books per episode as I've hauled in the previous month, so that by the end of this year, I will hopefully reach my ultimate goal of getting all of the stacks off the floor and into a proper home, either on my shelves or on somebody else's. In episode 21, we shelved 11 books and we scrapped 4. So we are going to be starting episode 22 with 45 books in the stacks. Hello my guys, happy new year and welcome to episode 22 of Shelve It or Scrap It, the vlog series where I try and get this overspill of books behind me out of these stacks and onto my shelves through any means possible, usually through a process of reading them and deciding whether I would like to shelve them or whether I would like to scrap them. So if this is the first episode you are ever seeing, I will link the full Shelve It or Scrap It playlist down in my description box so you can get yourself caught up on all 21 episodes that came before this one. But for my girlies who are in the know, welcome to 2026. This is the final episode, not the final episode, calm down. The final episode where I'm going to be abiding by the rules of 2025, which was that I had to read the same amount of books in an episode of Shelve It or Scrap It as I'd hauled in the previous month of 2025. Now, we obviously fell a little bit behind there, and so for episode 22, I am going to be balancing the books that I read with the books that I hold in September. So the reason why this is the final episode doing this is because I'm never going to claw back those months, am I? At this point, I'm not a fast reader, guys. I actually, if I try to read any more than I do, if I try and read any more than 200 pages a day on a regular basis, it actually makes me hate reading. So I've come to accept the fact that I'm not really going to catch up on those months missed. And for 2026, you know, new year, new me, all that bullshit. So we're going to be using a different method to select the amount of books that we're going to be reading for the coming year. I don't know what that is yet. So we're both going to have to wait until episode 23 to find that out. But in September, it's actually really nice in comparison to a lot of the episodes that we had throughout 2025, because in September, I hauled a grand total of 6 books, but of those 6 books, I unhauled 2 of them because I had a standard edition that was sent to me by the publisher of Alchemized by Senlin Yu, but I knew that that was going to be a book in the adult fairy loot box and I didn't need 2 copies, so I gave my copy, my standard copy, to my nail tech. And then the other one that I unhauled was Warrior Princess Assassin by Bridget Kemmerer, which I've gone on a roller coaster with that book because I thought it was reverse harem and I don't like reverse harem, personal preference. It's got to the point with that trope where there's just no point me even trying books that contain it because I know I won't like them. So I decided to unhaul it, and then a bunch of people in my comments said that it was poly, and I was like, okay, it's not reverse harem, I'll give it a try. And then I realized that I don't like poly either because of the same reason that I don't like reverse harem. And going into 2026, I am wanting to only read books that I'm genuinely excited about. So no more giving things a try for the sake of it. And I do think that that is going to impact Shelve It or Scrap It. But I'm also confident that this is the year that we manage to get these stacks down. And I know I've said that before, but I really do think that this is the year. Anyway, my point is that I only have to read 4 books for this video, and that to me sounds like freedom. So we are going to be going into this episode looking for absolute bangers. So I've decided for episode 22 that I'm going to be reading Booktuber's favorite books of 2025. So I've watched the majority of the best books of the year videos that have fallen into my subscription feed. So I'm going to start by showing you guys all of the best books of 2025 that I currently own that are on my TBR. Some of them are in the stacks, some of them are on my shelves, but these are all of the ones that I have and are eligible to read for this episode. I am going to be using my own little free will to decide which books we're actually going to be reading, because obviously I'm not going to get to all of these, but there is a big chance that this is going to be the episode of Shelve It or Scrap It that never ends, because I know that I have different tastes to a lot of these people that I subscribe to, okay? Some of them I watch for the vibes and the personality, not because we have a matching taste in books, but looking at this list, there are so many bangers on here, so many books from my TBR that I am so excited to get to. So I think it is going to be difficult to get to a point where I don't like a book, like I want to scrap a book, and we can actually maybe end this episode. Before I decide what I'm going to read, because so many choices, I do want to just let you guys know as a check-in, as a baseline, the stacks are a lot bigger than when we ended the last episode. We did know that they were going to be, because I've now added all of the books that I hold in like the second half of my October haul, my November, my December haul, and also my January unboxing books have hit the stacks. But like I said, I think this is going to be our year, guys. So even though we're starting this episode on 45 books after ending the last episode on 23, and yes, that hurts, I think that these stacks that you see behind me are going to be our final boss. So to start to take down this final boss, what am I going to be reading? I have just read an epic fantasy, and that was my third book of this year. My first book of the year was an epic fantasy. So I had a palette cleanser in between those two books, and I think I want to go for another book in that kind of vein. There are so many thick romantasy and fantasy books on this list that I'm so excited to dive into, but I do think that palette cleanser will be really beneficial to me. So against my better judgment, I'm going to go for Deep End by Ali Hazelwood, which was on Meg's list from Meg with Books. Now, oh, we have a crumple. Don't crumple. I think this is the book that Kami picked up and tried to carry away, and I was very upset about it. The reason why this is kind of against my better judgment is because this book would have to do something drastically wrong to be a scrap. The reason why there's two Ali Hazelwood books in the stacks right now is because I have a little bit of a backlog of her books. I've read, I think, half of the ones that I own, and so I wanted to move some down here so that there's a bigger chance of them being prioritized. But Ali Hazelwood is my favorite contemporary romance author. If I were to scrap any Ali Hazelwood books, I do think it would be the paranormal romances, because paranormal romance is just not my genre. But her contemporary romance, I have read 4 and I have given all of them 5 stars. The only Ali Hazelwood thing I've read and not given 5 stars to was the Halloween novella that she released last year, but I'm not a novella person, I'm a slow burn person, honestly. So a romance novella, I'm not surprised that I didn't give it 5 stars, and I only read it because it was seasonally appropriate and Ali Hazelwood. But Deep End is a 5-star prediction for me, so I think we're guaranteed to start this video with a banger, and it makes me really nervous saying that now because I've given so many Ali Hazelwood books 5 stars. I'm kind of at a point where I'm scared that I'm going to read one that I don't love, and then what do I do, like, if I break my streak? But this one, I actually don't really know very much about it, aside from that it is Ali Hazelwood's, like, sports romance. I believe that this is smuttier than the Ali Hazelwood books that I have personally already read, and I have heard that that makes sense within the context of this particular story. So I'm excited to see what the context is, because I actually don't know anything more than that. That's all I've been told by people in my comments. But this one is a romance between, I think, a swimmer and a diver. And I think it is still STEM because one of them is a medical student or something like that. Because I think they're on like sports scholarships at a university, but the thing that they're actually studying is something in the sciences. But I am so excited to get into a new Ali Hazelwood. And like I said, my ethos for 2026 is to only read books that I'm excited by. And I am already 4 books into the year, infinitely more excited to read than I ever have been, or than I have been for a while, knowing that I don't get to read just one 5-star prediction, but a bunch of them in a row. What is this? Is this how the rest of you guys have been living? because it's not how I've been living. So this book is a little bit long for a contemporary romance. It's almost 450 pages, which for me, the contemporary romance sweet spot is between 300 and 400, but I do actually prefer it on the shorter end, typically between like 3 and 350. But for Ali Hazelwood, I'll allow it, and for Ali Hazelwood only. So this is an interesting premise because it starts off a little bit messy, and there's an element of it that is still making me feel some kind of way because our main character is a diver and she doesn't have a massive social life or anything, but she's friends with another girl who's on the dive team, and her boyfriend is an Olympic medalist called Lucas, who is also our love interest. And she is confiding in the main character that she thinks that she may end up breaking up with him. They've been together since they were like 15, so like 3 or 4 years at this point, but she's thinking of breaking up with him because sexually he is into some stuff that she is not, and he's a perfect gentleman about it. He's not pressured her to do anything that she doesn't want to do, but she kind of feels like while the sex is decent, she wants to go out and explore the kind of things that she's into and allow him to go and explore the kinds of things that he's into. So our main character also has an experience of being into some kinkier stuff and having a boyfriend that she broke up with a couple of years ago, but having a boyfriend that also wasn't into that. So she talks to her friend Penelope to try and see if maybe she can just help their relationship a little bit and give advice and her perspective on being somebody who is into the same kind of stuff as this girl's boyfriend is. And Penelope's actually really chill about it. And she's like, no, you know what? I just want to be free. I kind of want to do my own thing. And I want him to go and do his own thing. So they break up. And then one day when Penelope's drunk at a party, she's like, oh my God, like you guys should hook up because you're into the same stuff. So this is obviously like kind of outrageous in the moment. But the more that our main character thinks about it and the more that she notices that this guy is actually seemingly into her, the more she considers exploring a physical relationship with him. Now, the reason why it feels a little bit weird to me is just because we have this element of the ex-girlfriend. Both of them seem very, very chill about the breakup. Like, I would expect both of them to be a little bit more, I don't want to say possessive because that seems like that's quite a strong term, you know, but I feel like I expect them to have stronger feelings about the other one, even though they still claim that they're best friends. They have a lot of love for each other. I feel like they're very, very chill considering the length of the relationship that they've had. And then I also don't like the way that they're still not necessarily hanging out together, but like Penelope will like very casually sit on Lucas's lap, or they just like very casually touch because they've been so close to each other for such a long time. And obviously me knowing that this is a contemporary romance, that our main character is probably going to end up with this guy in the end and live happily ever after. I don't know, it's making me feel some kind of way. So that dynamic though seems to be like completely unproblematic, and the further that I've got into this book, the more and more unproblematic, even as like things are developing, that relationship between Penelope and the main character Scarlett, and the dynamic between Penelope and Lucas is just all seemingly fine. Which I found a little bit weird. But in terms of like the reason why Penelope and Lucas broke up, the stuff that Lucas is into, that Scarlett is also into, is BDSM. Now, I don't know kind of the extent to which they're going to be exploring it within this book, but at the minute it seems like they are both very keen on exploring a sub-dom kind of relationship. Penelope really likes to be told what to do because she feels like a whole weight is lifted where she doesn't have to overthink or make any decisions. And Lucas is looking for a more dominant role in the bedroom. So these two literally match up perfectly, which is why they do start to explore this physical relationship. And this dynamic that Scarlett seeks in the bedroom is kind of paralleled by some past trauma that she has, where she lived with a very abusive, manipulative, and controlling father who, when she was 13, she moved away from, but the way that he treated her and her stepmother has had a lasting effect on her. She's quite nervous around men. She doesn't like loud noises, which Lucas kind of picks up on very quickly. And she feels almost like she can't reconcile these two separate parts of herself. The part of her that doesn't want to be around pushy men that are controlling and want to tell her what to do, but then in the bedroom, that is exactly what she needs to be able to relax and enjoy herself. So we have lots of interesting discussions going on here as well. These two are also both pre-med students, as well as Lucas being a swimmer and Scarlet being a diver. I do think that this is a little bit of a different dynamic to the usual from Ali Hazelwood. All three of the books that I've read from her have the same kind of grumpy sunshine balance going on. I mean, The Love Hypothesis and Love on the Brain, my two favorites, almost exactly the same book. And then I've also read Not in Love, which was slightly different, but I still feel was very much the same kind of romance and in line with the other two. And then Check-in May, very similar, but a little bit, I feel, toned down on the sunshine element, but I think very much the same dynamics that I was used to from Ali Hazelwood, just a bit less explicit because it's young adults. And this one is like grumpy, but they're not grumpy around each other. One of Penelope's criticisms of Lucas is that she thought that he lacked passion and that he could be very cold, which is an issue that the main character is like not having with him at all. And she also views herself the same way, but through Lucas's eyes, she is a much warmer person than the way that she sees herself. Something that I'm finding very interesting about this one, though, is the way that Scarlett's trauma is shaping the narrative, because everything she does not feel good enough at. So she is constantly, her inner monologue is, I'm a terrible person, I'm a terrible diver, this person is so much cooler than me, Lucas is so much hotter than me, he could be with anyone, I'm failing everything. And like, for all intents and purposes, she's a pretty skilled, talented diver, like professional standard, but I don't know what level that is because I'm not a sports person. She is doing really well. She's going to be going to medical school, or at least she's trying to. She is pulled aside to work on this special research project. Everything that she does, she kind of excels at, but her inner monologue is constantly telling her that she needs to do better. She's not good enough. Nobody likes her. She's useless. She's going to fail at everything. And this comes from the past trauma when she was a child of living with somebody who was abusive and constantly like belittling her and her stepmother and putting her down, which has very much formed a core part of the way that she feels about herself, which I think is really interesting. But back to the typical Ali Hazelwood dynamic, while I think that this strays away from that a little bit, something that is very in line with Ali Hazelwood romances that I've read in the past is that the male main character is very observant and aware of the female main character, and she is completely oblivious to everything that is going on around her, which, if you guys know me, you know that I love that, because it often leads to my favorite trope in romance, which is the he falls first trope, which is in every single Ali Hazelwood book that I've read. We have a male main character who is incredibly attentive and has noticed the female main character, not literally years, I'm being dramatic, which is also a theme in this book, but like a long time before the female main character notices them. And I'm eating that up. So far the jury is out whether this is going to be a 5-star for me. I don't feel like I'm quite feeling the tension yet. There are moments when I am, but moments when I'm not. So we'll see how the rest of this book pans out. I'm very much enjoying it and I'm really invested in it. And I always want to be coming back to it and reading it when I'm not. But whether it's 5 stars, we're going to have to wait and see. So I am ready to lock in tonight. I haven't read too much since I last saw you. I'm on page 196 of this. So I'm still not quite at the halfway point, but all I want to do is read this book, and I have so many things that I need to film and edit, that is all I've been doing. So I've just done a little bit of yoga and I have gotten myself cozy in my pajamas. Curtis is streaming tonight, so I'm all alone. I'm going to put an ambience room on TV. I have my cozy dog blanket and I'm going to get through some pages. I am flying through this when I actually read it, but because we're at the beginning of the year, the content creation is time consuming. So it's only later on in the day that I'm actually getting a chance to pick up my book. Speaking of books, I have actually just signed up to BookBeat, and I also have an affiliate code to share with you guys. So if you don't know what BookBeat is, it is a audiobook platform that works similarly to Spotify in that you get a certain amount of hours in a month for a price. So on Spotify, obviously with your premium membership, you get 15 hours, and there are 3 different tiers. On BookBeat, I think one is 20 hours. That one is the basic subscription, and then the standard subscription has 40 hours, and the premium subscription is 100 hours per month. So if you are a heavy audiobook listener, or just a casual one actually, because the 20 hours per month is actually quite reasonably priced, it's cheaper than Spotify is. So if you are an audiobook listener and you would like to give BookBeat a try, then I do have an affiliate link that I'm going to put in my description box in all of my videos going forward for the next 3 months, which is how long my affiliate code lasts. And you can either click on my affiliate link or you can use my code BECCABUM to get, which is my Instagram, just FYI if you don't know why it's that, to get yourself, I think, a 45-day free trial of BookBeat, and I will get a little something as well if you sign up using my code. This is actually going to be really helpful because I do use Spotify mainly for if I'm reading a book and I don't want to switch, or I don't have a designated audiobook and I need to go and like walk the dog or something, I'll just put whatever I'm currently listening to on as an audiobook and listen to like 2 chapters. And it's great because you don't have to pay for the full book. You can just listen to those 2 chapters and it'll obviously just like tick down your hours instead of you having to commit to the whole book as like an allocation in a subscription. So yeah, I just thought I would mention that. But now I'm going to get cozy and I'm going to read some more of Deep End. I'm so excited. I'm still not 100% into this yet, but I'm definitely into it enough that I constantly want to be reading it. So I just finished Deep End by Ali Hazelwood and it was not 5 stars. I know, guys, I feel it too. That disappointment you're feeling in me, I'm feeling in myself. I knew that my string of Ali Hazelwood 5 stars would have to come to an end at some point because that's just probability. I was hoping that we would be able to last a little bit longer though. I did think we were going to make it to Bride before my unblemished Ali Hazelwood record would come to an end. But alas, we are here. We have reached that day. Very sad moment. I was so confident that I was going to have my first 5-star read of 2025. I will say I really enjoyed this though. And, you know, up until the very, very end of this, I would have said that this was a 4.5 and I was being a little picky. I think upon finishing this, that it's actually a 4. So the reason why it was getting that 1/2 star knocked off is that there was a character in here that irritated me the entire way through this book. And our main character is very shy. She's reserved. She doesn't have a lot of friends. She doesn't have a lot of self-confidence, partially because of, as I mentioned, the way that she grew up. But she's also had a diving injury that she has spent like 1.5 to 2 years recovering from. And while she has technically physically recovered, the injury kind of just reinforced all of these negative feelings that she had about herself that made her believe that she was a failure and that she was not good enough and that somebody like Lucas couldn't like her and that she's too boring for anybody to want to be friends with her. And so I understand why the main character was somebody who didn't want to rock the boat, who didn't want to put herself out there in a way where she was opening herself up and being vulnerable, who was somebody who wanted to be loyal to her friends that she'd made throughout, well, she'd known them longer than the course of this book, but we saw some friendships like really blossom throughout this book. So I definitely understand that. But the way that another character in this book was being coddled and the way that she was being babied in a way where everybody else's feelings came second to hers really, really irritated me, especially because the love interest is somebody who is very straightforward. He is very, very blunt. Like, he says it as he sees it. He's not really shy about his feelings. He's reserved and a little private, but if he has to say something, he says it in no uncertain terms. And because this was somebody that they both knew, he also became part of the problem and was coddling like this other person's feelings. And it just got on my nerves to the very, very end that this person was not only behaving the way that they behaved, but also that they were allowed to behave the way that they behaved throughout the entirety of this book. And nobody was like clear enough and was like, okay, like, you need to stop. This is not okay. Just take a step back. So that was the reason why the 1/2 star was coming off, because, you know, when I'm reading a romance, I want to be invested, which I definitely was. I want to be giggling, I want to be kicking my feet, and I was irritated for a lot of this book. But the reason why the other 1/2 star came off is that one of my favorite things about Ali Hazelwood books is the, you know, the declaration of love that you get. Ali Hazelwood's heroes are professionals at this. Some of the best declarations, they have me like gasping out loud. And this one didn't. Like the whole resolution, third act breakup resolution, final note that we ended on, it was all right. It was okay. I just don't feel like these two characters clicked for me. I think that their sexual chemistry was definitely there. And considering this is a little bit different from Ali Hazelwood's other books because it focuses more on a BDSM relationship when we're talking about the explicit content in this book, I thought that that might potentially be the reason why I didn't gel with this romance as much. But actually, that didn't bother me. I do think because I prefer my romances, like the ideal formula for me is that we would slow burn for 2/3 of the book and then we'd have like 2 or 3 sex scenes and then third act breakup, happily ever after, ride into the sunset. So because the explicit content came a little bit earlier in this book, because it was mainly to start off with about these two characters connecting about their shared interests in the bedroom, while I enjoyed the smut for the most part, when you get to a certain amount of sex scenes in a book, the novelty starts to wear off a little bit for me. So I was definitely feeling that, but generally throughout it, like I enjoyed the smut. I thought that they had great sexual chemistry. I just wasn't kicking my feet in terms of their romantic interactions, and sometimes I was, but I wasn't 100% there, you know, and I've just been talking about this with my patrons because I'm doing reading sprints right now, but 5 stars for me is a feeling. The only difference between a 4-star and a 5-star book is the vibes. If the vibes aren't there, then it's not 5 stars, and if I feel it in my soul, it's a 5-star rating. I didn't feel this one in my soul, and I hate when this happens because now I'm questioning my feelings on Ali Hazelwood. I'm like, if I pick up the love hypothesis right now, would that also be 4 stars? Was it all a lie? Was it a ruse? Am I a different person now? But no, I just don't think that this book was 100% for me. It missed a little bit of the Ali Hazelwood magic. We had a mix up with the relationship dynamic. The grumpy pairing maybe was what wasn't doing it for me. And I do think I love a simp, okay? The harder they simp, the harder I fall. But I think in this one specifically, while it's always obvious in Ali Hazelwood romances that our hero is obsessed with our heroine, I think in this one it was a little bit, I don't want to say too clear, but I think the main character, because of the situation that was going on with this other third character, and also she has this like overwhelming sense of not being good enough for literally anything in her life. She was in denial for a lot of this book, so she knew what was going on, but she was purposefully burying her head in the sand. And so that got a little bit frustrating to read when the kind of climax, for want of a better word, of the romantic relationship was continuously put on hold because she just didn't want to face it in this moment. So I still loved it. It's still being shelved. Ali Hazelwood, still an auto by author for me. But alas, I have now officially broken my Ali Hazelwood 5-star streak. It is a sad day. I'm so glad that this was on Meg's Best Books of the Year list though, so that I could pick it up because I've needed an excuse to read more of my Ali Hazelwood collection for a very long time. So now, of course, we need to shelve this. And this is where I think choosing a romance to start this video is at some point throughout this going to bite me in the ass. We have 2 options. There's 2 books from the Booktuber's favorites list that I've compiled that are on these shelves. Whether I can rearrange these shelves, because you know how awkward they are, in a way that allows me to read one of those books, we'll find out. You know, when I bought these shelves, I thought that I was a genius. I was utilizing a dead space on my landing because they're nice and narrow. They fit this gap perfectly. They look pretty good. And then every time I have to film here, I realize what a terrible mistake I made, but it's fine. We can cope. So Ali Hazelwood books are up here. The 2 options that I have on Booktuber's favorites list from these shelves are not up here. And therein lies the problem. So the first one isn't super far down. So I think that this one is probably going to be the most likely contender because I have less to move. But that one is the Book of Azrael by Amber V. Nicole. This one was on Vish's list from Books with Vish. We have very, very similar taste in fantasy and romantasy. If you like my recommendations, then you should subscribe to Vish and check her out because we do overlap on quite a lot. There are a couple of things we don't overlap on though, and that is Zodiac Academy for one, Melissa K. Rorich for another. But I did actually speak to Vish about this one, and she says that she doesn't know which way I'm going to go, whether I'm going to love this or hate it. So I feel like it's a good contender because it's a 50-50 shelf or scrap. Hamilton. Hello. The other option is much further down. You can't even see. And it is If It Makes You Happy by Julie Olivia. I love the cover on this one, and I was super excited to read it when it was sent to me by Penguin Michael Joseph. This was on Mel's favorites list from Mel Reads, and I'm very excited to read it because I've heard it's like a 90s Gilmore Girls style romance, but as you can tell, it's very obviously autumnal, and we are not currently in autumn. So realistically, whatever fits is the book that I'm going to read. But let's start by trying to get deep end onto these shelves. Once again, alphabetization is a loose concept over here. So let's just go for it. Oh God, we just gotta like, every shelf has to be moved up one. So I don't think I'm going to make it all the way down to If It Makes You Happy anyway. So we'll get this out because that's the gap that we're aiming to fill. Can't disrupt these. So it's going to have to be Anna Huang, which that's actually better alphabetization than we had to start off with, if I'm being honest. Are you going to be able to move, or are you too thick? She's too thick. Oh my God, have I done it? Thank you. Thank you. I know that was quite a challenge. So the Book of Azrael it is, as recommended by Vish. I'm actually really excited to read this one, but I am a little bit nervous because it's one that I've kind of expected to love, and I'm scared that I'm not going to. Especially because I met Amber Nicole at Rare, so this is signed and personalised to me, and you know how it goes when they're signed and they're personalised. Becca normally doesn't like them. She was actually so lovely as well, so I would really hate to dislike this book. And me and Vish have so much crossover that I am hopeful, but then if Vish herself is unsure which way I'm going to go, who knows which way I'm going to go. I don't actually know too much about this. It's the first book in the Gods and Monsters series, and I definitely know that I think the fantastical gods play a big part in the plot. I think that the love interest potentially is a monster, and I've heard that the main character is a villain. So that's all I have to go off. I feel like I've heard pretty good things, and I've also had this recommended to me, so that also bodes well. She's a thick one though. And the text, oh my God, the font in this is so small for a romantasy book. It's nearly 600 pages. So I'm in it for the long haul, guys, but I'm committed. I am confident that we can find a 5-star in this video. Maybe this one's the one. So we have hit a little bit of a roadblock in this video because in 2 days we are going to be having a major renovation starting in our house. It is probably the most extensive renovation that we've had done to date because we are having our bathroom done, and it is a complete rip out of everything. So tiles, lights, all of obviously the bathroom, the bath, the shower, the toilet, and the entire thing replaced. So because of the proximity of this room, the bathroom, to these bookshelves, I'm going to be taking these down because what I don't want is for them to be catching them while they're bringing things like the bathtub. We're having a freestanding bath, which is going to be pretty big. And I imagine they're going to be bringing things down the hallway, maybe wanting to lean things against this wall before it's being like properly installed. So I'm just going to get these out of the way. I have a box ready to get everything into, and then I'm going to slide this over here because the boiler is in the spare room. I imagine they're going to need to get that as well. So we've already boxed up everything from the bathroom that we're not going to need for the next 2 weeks because it's 1 week for rip out, 1 week for installation, and then a third week for finishing off if everything goes to plan, which includes like the new light fitting and the radiator, the skirting boards, things like that. So the boxes of stuff that we've boxed it from the bathroom, I'm going to tuck everything into this little alcove and put a dust cover over it so that this whole area is free, because we're going to have a lot of dust as well with the plaster coming off and the tiles coming off and everything going back on. So what that means for this video, if I finish the Book of Azrael and I enjoy it, which at this point I'm less than 100 pages in, it's very slow going because it's like 570 pages of very tiny text. And the way that the world is built is alongside the plot. So we start pretty much in an action scene with our main character. So before we know anything about the world, the plot is moving. She's searching for the Book of Azrael, for this man that she's like essentially sold her life to in exchange for her sister's life. And there's a lot of different creatures in this world. It's giving me like major urban fantasy vibes like Crescent City. And also this book, which I didn't think I would like, The Deer and the Dragon by Piper CJ, but I actually really enjoyed it. It's slow going because I like kind of a slow-paced book that mainly focuses on world building and characters before we get into the plot. That's just my preferred introduction into a series because I find it more easily digestible. When we're trying to do like the plot and the characters alongside the world building, and it's a little bit of a more complex world, it's not contemporary. Like they have a contemporary lifestyle, but it's not set in our world. It is a completely different world where the realms between worlds opened and they've kind of collided and turned into this like mishmash of different species, and that had like a negative effect on the world of our main character, who was a mortal at the start, but she's been changed into this immortal creature. I tend to have to take the book a lot slower to be able to retain all of this information that I'm receiving. So at the minute I'm not quite 100 pages into it. My dream, the ideal goal, was to finish it before I had to take these down, but I'm not going to read 470 pages today, and I need to get everything out of the bathroom so that they're ready to start on Monday. So essentially, if I end up enjoying this book and wanting to shelve it, I'm not going to have any shelves to put it on. Obviously, we'll see what my final verdict is when we finish, but I just thought that I would let you guys know that for the remainder of this video, these books are going to be inaccessible. So any romance, which the only thing on this shelf that was a contender for this video at this point was If It Makes You Happy, but this has now been taken out of the running because everything's going into boxes. So it's been a few days and I also feel like I've lived a few lifetimes because the bathroom renovation is now well underway, which means I'm now scared of filming in daylight because I don't want to be perceived. And I've also spent 24 hours in London over the last few days. So I am quite a ways into this book now, however, not quite as far in as I would have liked to be at this point. I'm on page 370, so I still have 200 pages to go. I think that's roughly like 65% of the way through this book. And I do feel like I'm hitting a little bit of a brick wall with it now, which is really upsetting actually, because I think that this was instantly compelling when I originally picked it up. So I can't remember how much I told you about the plot of this one, but it's an urban fantasy, which is nice because it wasn't necessarily what I was expecting. I expected it to be more of, I guess, a typical high fantasy. And in terms of it being urban fantasy, I feel like that's something that I've discovered that I actually really like in a modern setting. And we're following this girl who is a monster. I think she called like an Igmaruthan, potentially, and she wasn't always, she was a mortal, but she ended up in servitude to this monster who turned her into the same species as him. So she has a few powers. One of her big ones is that she can shapeshift, and she's also like a super fighter. She's his second actually, so she's like the top general in his arsenal, and she essentially got herself into servitude so that she could save her sister. Something really interesting about this series is that the worlds kind of collided. I don't understand the exact specifics of all of the world stuff, but there was something that happened where a species from a different world came to the world that the main character was from, and they brought a plague with them, and the plague killed her parents and almost killed her sister. So she sold herself into servitude in exchange for her sister's life. So these two are now either immortal or very close to it, and I think it's been alluded to that our main character is at least 1,000 years old at this point, and that is how long she's been serving this monster. But she has also been sleeping with him. They're not in a relationship, but they have that kind of vibe going on. So the monster, I think he's called Caden, has her searching for a book called the Book of Azrael, which is the book that was created by a god. So she is doing whatever she can to get hold of this book because she doesn't have a choice. She's just following her master's bidding, and this puts her in the path of a god who they didn't think actually existed, but because one of his general dies, he has like an elite squad called the Hand. He has to come to this world to take up the mantle of king, which he has been avoiding for a very long time since the destruction of his society, which I believe he strongly feels at fault for. And our main character kind of decides to make a stand and switches sides so that she now kind of serves this god once again in exchange for her sister's life. The god offers her sister protection and a chance at a real life where her sister isn't being held over her head all of the time. And in exchange, once they finish this mission that they're currently working on, the main character has to pay for the crimes against his people that she has committed. So I really liked this to start off with. I was slowly catching on to the world building. Like I said to you guys, it's not executed in my preferred way. Everything's kind of happening at once. But I found it really compelling and I really wanted to continue on and read more. Now that I'm approaching this middle section, I think since about the 30 to 40% mark, I am getting a little bit bored. I read, I think, about 30% on the train to London. And when I picked it back up on the way home the day after, I felt like there was just a real switch in the dynamic between our main character and this god called Liam, where they'd gone from hating each other and distrusting each other to becoming friends and like helping each other through some trauma, which I understand logically like why that is happening, but I do feel like the switch between the distrustful enemies into like friendship, respect and care for each other happened really quickly. Pretty much when I put the book down as I was arriving in London, they were kind of maybe about to get on the same page, and then I feel like they had this really strong connection when I just picked it back up, and I feel like I missed a transitionary period. And because of that, I'm assuming obviously that the relationship in here is going to be between the main character and this god Liam, but I don't feel anything. Like I don't feel any chemistry, and I think that that's kind of where it's lost me at this point. I have only read 10% since I felt that disconnect, which 10% isn't a lot, but in this book it does feel like it, because I mean it's 577 pages of tiny font, so we have a lot of content that I consume in here. So I honestly, the way I feel right now, I feel like I could DNF because I'm so far into it and I enjoyed it so much at the beginning. I do want to give this one the benefit of the doubt and see it through, but I feel like we've just hit a little bit of a plateau, and I'm really hoping that it picks up again in the second half, because I had not necessarily 5-star vibes at the beginning. If it would have continued to build on the foundations that I was loving at the beginning, 100% would have got 5-star vibes, but that's definitely tapered off at this point. So I do hope that we can kind of maybe salvage that with the ending. I'm here to give you the tea while I wait for my nice hot cup of peppermint and licorice tea to cool down, because I've had a little bit of a sore throat and I just want to nip it in the bud. It's actually, I've had it for a few days and it's not progressing, so I think this is as far as it's going to get, but it's also not particularly pleasant. Talking about things that weren't particularly pleasant, I finished the Book of Azrael and I should have DNF'd it at 60%, but I will say I don't think that there's anything necessarily wrong with the book. It just really didn't click for me and I'm upset about it. I'm thinking back to when I started this and I said jokingly, because I thought I was going to love this, especially because with the odd exception, me and Vish have very similar taste in romantasy, but I made a joke about how because it's signed and personalized I probably won't like it. And here we are. I'm so upset, especially because the very end of this book led me to be just very slightly intrigued about what may follow for the future of this series. But given my new ethos for 2026 of not continuing on with things or saying I'm going to continue on with series, to give them a second chance and also only picking up books that I'm excited about, I am just going to call it quits after this one. It's fine. But yeah, my big issue with this is that I really felt like I missed that transitionary period where these guys went from, not from enemies to lovers, because I saw that transition, but from hating each other to liking each other. I feel like that bit just happened a little bit too quickly. It felt like they had one conversation that really just completely changed their minds about each other, and then we started to progress from that moment, and I just didn't feel like I felt it. I felt like it really lacked chemistry in the romantic relationship, and as obviously their relationship progressed in terms of not romantically necessarily, just as these two characters spending more time with each other and getting to know each other, and as that became a more dominant part of this alongside the plot and what they were trying to achieve, because I was just really not invested in that element of this story at all. I did very quickly start to lose interest, and unfortunately the ending did not save this book for me, and I'm more upset about it because, like I said, the first 30% of this was really promising, and I thought that I was going to love it because it's an urban fantasy. I liked the world that we were establishing, but it just lost me somewhere along the way. I do think that this is also very slightly repetitive because as my interest was waning in this, I wasn't paying as close attention to it as I was earlier on, but I kept noticing just like the odd sentence, and I'm like, I'm sure I already know this. I'm sure that I've read this before. It wasn't too bad, like it wasn't From Blood and Ash levels of repetitive, where the whole conversation that happened a page before plays out again the page after in like a slightly different way. And I feel like there was a slight overemphasis on some elements of this that I hadn't read. It was only like a few pages before that I read this like specific bit of information, and I didn't feel like I quite needed it repeated. But you know what, honestly, aside from that, I can't criticize it at all. It's just one that really did not work for me. I think if you are a fan of any of the series that I mentioned that this is giving me similar vibes to, like Terror at the Gates, Crescent City, the Piper CJ series, I think it's called like the Fallen Gods series, then maybe give this one a try because it was very reminiscent of those at the beginning, and maybe the romance will work for you in a way that it didn't work for me. I do feel like potentially with Terror at the Gates specifically, I always say that I feel like Scarlett St. Clair perfectly blended the hallmarks of the urban fantasy genre in its height, like in the early 2000s, with more modern conventions of fantasy romance. And I feel like maybe the reason why this one didn't work for me is because I felt like the romance itself was written more in line with those mid 2000 series, and that could maybe be why it didn't work for me. But I actually, I was planning on using a loophole for this because I was sure I was going to shelve it. I was going to tell you guys about how, oh no, I don't have my romance shelves anymore, so I can't shelve it, but I will when they go up, like in a few weeks. But we're just gonna have to go back to the stacks. And no, I'm scrapping this book. It's a scrap. I don't even need to use the loophole that I thought so hard about. It's just going to be on hold. But that does mean we are going to be going back to the stacks for book number 3 of this vlog. And I'm not going to move. Honestly, you know what? I have free will in this episode, so I'm just picking from the list that I have on my phone. This is the book that I originally wanted to start this vlog with, but I did feel like I wanted a little bit of a palate cleanser before we got there. I will say, because it's a romantasy, we'll go get it in a second, and because I have just not really loved a romantasy, I'm not as enthusiastic about it as I was at the start of this vlog, but I have also just put it on my 2026 TBR, so I feel like we have to commit to it. So let's go get it. It was right at the bottom of the stacks, but because I have just put it on that video that I literally just filmed, it's right at the top, so we can go snag it together. There she is. I feel like I've really committed myself to tomes for this episode, but I'm going to be going with Quicksilver by Callie Hart. Speaking of tomes, actually, when I was in London earlier this week, I went to Waterstones and I had a cheeky look at book 2 in this series because at that point I was thinking that I was going to love this and I would really want to continue. This is 577 pages with tiny font. Book 2 is like 750 pages with tiny font, and it did take me a while to get through this one, but honestly I was shook of. I do wish I was invested though, because if I loved this I would be so excited at the prospect of that, but I didn't. So let's see if we can actually get a romantasy hit for this vlog. Still hoping for a 5-star as well. Quicksilver by Callie Hart. I want to read this because I'm intrigued. Actually, this is one of the most hyped romantasy books of the last couple of years, so I want to see what the deal is. I actually don't really know that much about it, aside from that it has fae, the magic surrounds metal in some way. This guy here is called Kingfisher, and all the girlies go wild for him. But that is the extent of my knowledge. The other reason why I want to read this one though is because I never actually wanted this edition of this book. I went to a Callie Hart talk. It wasn't a sign-in, but my book is signed. And when they advertised the sign-in, they just announced the new editions. And I actually prefer the new editions to this one. And they are currently, with the metallic edges, they're currently half price at WH Smith's. And I was going to buy both of them because obviously like half price on a hardback. That's quite a deal, especially ones with such fancy features. And then I was just going to unhaul this one and replace it with the special one, but I was like, you know what, I think I'm going to read this soon anyway, so I should probably just prioritize reading it, and then if I do like it, I can swap it out for the nice edition and then also pick up Brimstone. So this one is actually on a Sid's list. And of all of the people on Booktube that I follow and people that I watch regularly, I feel like Sid would be at the bottom of the list for people who I would expect to have Quicksilver on their best books of the year. I'm glad that she did though. Thank you so much, Sid, because I do really want to read this book and it has given me the excuse to prioritize it. This was actually the book that convinced me that I should do other booktubers' best books of the year for this episode of Shelve It or Scrap It, because I was desperate to get to this book. Like I said, having just had a flop of a romantasy, I'm a little less enthusiastic than I was, but I'm also optimistic that this is going to save the romantasy genre for this episode. I know that she's thick. How thick is she? 609 pages of not tiny font, but also not huge. So let's hope that this one is a little bit of a faster read. I'm doing my 24-hour readathon with my patrons starting tomorrow night. I'm currently on just regular sprints, but we're doing a readathon starting tomorrow evening, going through into the following day. And I'm hoping I can get through a chunk of this. I had a thought in my tiny little brain earlier, like, what if I can read this in 24 hours? I've never been that girl, but if it's that good, I could be. So let's keep our fingers crossed that it's that good. So I am exactly 200 pages into Quicksilver now, and I don't know if I'm loving it yet. I feel like I keep flicking backwards and forwards on how much I'm enjoying it, but I do think it is definitely more of a compelling read than the Book of Azrael does, and I'm getting through it much more quickly. So the thing that I actually really enjoy about this is the world. I wouldn't say it's anything incredibly unique. I do think it's different, but I do feel like I've read similar things before, just in a slightly different formation. But we're following a young woman called Ceres who lives in this city called the Silver City that's in a desert. And each area of the city it's kind of like spokes on a wheel. So they're in different sections that all spin out from this central point. And she is from the third, it's not a quadrant because there's more than four, but she's from the third section, and that is where they put not necessarily poor people. Everyone there is poor, but I believe that they are people who have dangerous opinions on the way that the citizens in this city are treated. So they're essentially quarantined for being sick, but they're not actually sick. However, the only water that they have to drink is incredibly dirty. They're not given the best rations, and they are very much suffering. I think that pretty much everybody who lives in the different areas of this city are suffering a little bit. I don't think anybody is doing especially well, but the people in third have it the worst. And so Ceres sneaks into other areas of the city to steal, and right at the beginning she steals a gauntlet from one of the guards and runs off back to her quadrant, and the guard come and hunt her down. So they take her to the queen, who demands that she's executed, and without really knowing what she's doing, Ceres ends up opening a portal, and this big like fey warrior steps out of it. She's like almost dead at this point because she's been sentenced to death by the queen, and the guards in the process of killing her when she accidentally opens this portal, and the fey guy comes and takes her through it into the world of the fey. When she's there, she learns that the portal that she opened is made out of quicksilver, and it seems that she has the blood of alchemists. Now the alchemist died hundreds of thousands of years ago, and the queen of the city that Ceres is from, she's a mortal queen, but she has reigned for 1,000 years, and nobody really knows how she's done it because they're pretty sure that she is mortal, not fey, and the fey also don't really know how she's done it. But essentially she stuck a sword in the portals which closed all of them forever, and the fey king is quite eager to have these reopened, so he challenges Ceres with figuring out how to do it. Now she herself is also mortal, so she doesn't understand how she can manipulate the quicksilver, but if she ever wants to go back to her home and see her brother again, that is something that she is going to have to figure out how to do. And our male main character, Kingfisher, is the one who's kind of tasked with assisting her. He's currently exiled as well, so the king makes a kind of deal with him that he may be pardoned if he can help her to figure out her ability within the next week so she can get these portals opened. Otherwise, I'm not sure whether he's going back into exile or whether it's death for him. But something that's really interesting about this is the magic that Ceres has, because because it is alchemy, and this is obviously to do with Quicksilver. Quicksilver is something that is obviously more commonly referred to as mercury, and it results in madness if you come into contact with it for too long. So it's the things that we have in thermometers, and it's why, like, if you break a thermometer, it's a really bad thing. And also it's the reason, like, why the Mad Hatter in Alice in Wonderland is mad. It's because hat makers used to include mercury in their hats, and through increased exposure they would slowly go mad. So the way that that is featured in this book I'm finding really interesting, because Kingfisher, he ain't doing too hot. He has this like relic that he uses to keep him in check, but essentially many years ago he accidentally, or maybe I don't know if it was accidental, but he absorbed some Quicksilver. The healers couldn't get all of it out of his body, so he has some lingering Quicksilver, which essentially means if he's not wearing this relic, then he starts to behave erratically and can't tell the difference between what's real and what isn't. And so I really like how Callie Hart has put kind of like the real effects of mercury within this world and having such like a visceral effect on one of our main characters. I think that that's really interesting. I am enjoying the world of the Fae. I would maybe like to know a little bit more about them at this point. I would say that we're doing a good job right now of exploring this new world and exploring just like the world in general as it's new to the reader, and getting to grips with things like the magic, because the Fae have different magic to Saris. Kingfisher's magic is made out of shadows, and then the other Fae, like, I don't know whether they share a common magic or whether they all have individual powers at this point. I am really interested in the realms as well, because where Saris is from, it's a desert, and we see the effects of that on her and her people. Like, they have, like I said, water rations, unclean water rations, and one of the first things she does, like, where she gets to the land of the Fae, the half-sister of Kingfisher, is her name Evelyn? I think it's Evelyn. She gives her a glass of water, and Saris is just like shocked by this, because water is so hard to come by, especially clean fresh water where she's from. And she goes to this Faeland, which is actually a realm of ice and snow, and she's only ever known once in her life what it is to be cold, and all of this is new to her. So I'm finding that really interesting, but also the possibility of more realms, because from what we've been told, when the Quicksilver portals closed, that cut off the contact between all of the different realms. So not just between the realm that Saris is from and the Fae realm, there's more outside of that I'm wondering whether we're going to be exploring throughout the course of this book, or maybe the rest of the series. I don't know how I feel about Kingfisher as a love interest at this point. I don't hate him. There are times when I feel a little bit of chemistry between the two, but generally speaking, like, I don't ship it. I'm not desperately waiting for the next time that he's going to appear on the page. I'm not like that level of invested. Obviously, we still have 400 pages of this book to go, so there is still time for that to grow on me. But I think because his behavior is a little bit erratic, and he's also incredibly confrontational and provocative, he seems to cross the line pretty frequently, and it's that's kind of confusing me, whether I think that is a line crossed or whether like I'm okay with the way that he's behaving. So yeah, we'll see how that plays out in the second half of the book. The language is pretty modern in terms of the dialogue. We have a lot of swearing in here, which I don't have a problem with, but just to give you an idea that it's more of a modern humorous dialogue style than it is true to any kind of like archaic language that we typically do see in high fantasy stories. And that's all I have to report so far. I'm not completely sold on this one yet, but I am enjoying my time reading it, and I'm hoping that it does win me over in the next 400 pages of this book. So I am continuing to make progress in this thick tome. I've just hit page 400. I'm on page 402. So 2/3 of the way through this beast, and I have come to the conclusion that I do enjoy this story, but romantically, she's not really doing it for me. Kingfisher is not my guy. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I really thought that I was going to fall for this man. Or male, sorry. Female, specifically. I think that the romantic scenes in here are chaotic and unpredictable. They seem to come out of nowhere. And I mean, Kingfisher as a character does have an element of unpredictability, which is brought about by the Quicksilver that he has that has not been removed. But I just feel like we're in the middle of like a normal scene and he just like grabs her. And I don't feel the tension leading up to it. There's no anticipation for me. Because typically, like in a book like this, I would be anticipating it. I'd be hoping for it, waiting for it. And it's actually giving me whiplash. I'm like, okay, we're in this normal scene. We're in the forge. We're working on alchemy stuff, and then all of a sudden like we're making out, and I'm upset. I'm disappointed. We actually turned a corner just after I updated you last time. When we got to around 30 to 40% in, we had a little bit of change of scenery, and with that I just immediately started to enjoy it more. And I think that is because the banter really came in, and that dynamic I am really enjoying. I think that they're really funny because Kingfisher is difficult. Like, he's difficult on purpose. He's contrary. And I like that about him. He gives very blunt, sarcastic answers to questions that theorists may ask him. So the humor is definitely working for me. I'm still very interested in this world. And also the magic system with the alchemy. We've added like an extra element in terms of fantastical creatures in this book. And at this point, let me turn this around so you can see it. At this point, I'm not sold on that. But it's very new where I'm up to. We've only just been introduced to it. I feel like we're going to get a lot more detail and information on that coming up, because there are certain things going on that we know we're not privy to yet, and we've had a couple of plot twists in that regard, so I may enjoy that a little bit more. But essentially, when we changed the setting from the kind of like fake court that we were exploring and the plot started to progress a little bit more, I got infinitely more invested in this one, and through like 35 to 55%, my enjoyment just kept growing. And I think that was brought to a halt a little bit when we got to some smut, which I didn't love, if I'm being honest. I was just reading words on a page. It was doing absolutely nothing for me in any regard. And so I think that if I do end up enjoying this and I do end up shelving it, it is 100% going to be credited to the plot, the world, and the magic, and not so much the romance. And I did think that the romance was going to be the thing that sold me on this, but I don't think that Kingfisher is going to be the one for me. Really compelling read though. I'm reading it really, really quickly. I think that is because I'm very interested in what's going on, but also I feel like it has the same kind of pace and style as Romantasy, like From Blood and Ash, which I think, have I already mentioned that in this vlog? I always compare everything back to From Blood and Ash because I feel like that was the first indie Romantasy series after like ACOTAR that really blew up, and it was like, okay, we can have these kinds of stories in indie pieces. But I do feel like From Blood and Ash has a writing style and a pace that is very common across indie romantasy, and now that traditional publishing has been moving into those spaces and buying up some of the series, which I'm pretty sure this started as indie, we are seeing that now obviously in traditionally published fiction because it's just indie fiction, but you can buy it at Waterstones. I finished Quicksilver and I'm conflicted. The book took another turn after our last update, and for a good like 20 to 30% though, I wasn't having the best time with it. It kind of lost my interest, and usually, like with the Book of Azrael, we would attribute that to the romance taking more of a prominent role in the story, but I don't feel like that was the case in Quicksilver. This is definitely not a slow burn. Like, those two start hitting it off pretty early on, but I don't feel like their relationship ever dominated the narrative. There was still plenty going on in terms of the plot and things that weren't surrounding their relationship to keep me interested. But for some reason, for a good 20 to 30% there, I was not having a great time. And at that point, I was kind of committed to DNF in this series. And then I read the last 15%. And once again, I was really enjoying it like I was at the beginning of the book. So this has left me feeling some type of way. I did end up rating this 3.5 stars. I am very middle of the road on it in my opinions, but I do think at the moment they're tipping more positive than they are negative. My big issue with this book is that I don't care about the romance. I feel like it lacked a lot of depth. I feel like regarding the romantic relationship we were being... Excuse you. I feel like regarding the romantic relationship, we were being told everything that we were supposed to feel, as opposed to like feeling it for ourselves or truly experiencing or believing in the relationship between these two. In terms of the, shall we say, plot events regarding their romantic relationship, it's absolutely nothing I haven't seen done before 1,000 times. And in that regard, it was extremely predictable. And so anything to do with the romance in this book, I found very underwhelming. But I do like the plot. I do like the world, and it is expanding a little bit more as I hoped and anticipated. And I do really like the magic. So what do we do about this? Right now, I don't want to buy those special editions, which were the driving force of me picking up this book right now. I have decided that it's not worth mainly the shelf space more than the money, because at £11 each at 50% off, they're actually not that much more expensive than a paperback. But the problem is this book, I don't like it. Like, the cover is not my preferred cover. I mean, it's fine. And if they were publishing the rest of the series in this edition, I wouldn't care that much. But considering the rest of the books aren't going to match this, and I don't want to commit to the special editions, I feel like I would be better off continuing this series either via a 99p Kindle copy or replacing the hardback with the paperbacks. But the problem with that is I have already looked. There is no paperback release for this book, and this one was traditionally published in 2024, and typically in the UK, a year after the hardback is released, you get a paperback release. But it seems that they've prioritized the new covers, the recover, publishing this once again in hardback as opposed to releasing a paperback. So I would assume that paperbacks of both 1 and 2 would be coming later on this year. Unfortunately, right now, I can't replace this with paperback editions of the first 2. So then I'm like, if I scrap this, will I ever be invested enough to pick up the paperbacks in the future? And honestly, I can't answer that question. But I think that weirdly, the best thing for me to do right now is just going to be to scrap this. There's no need for me to keep this hardback if I don't plan on buying Brimstone in the hardback, and I don't think I enjoy this series enough or enjoyed this book enough to commit the space on my shelves to hardbacks. So for now, I'm going to unhaul this hardback, and then in the future, maybe I will look out for a 99p Kindle deal on Brimstone and buy the paperbacks. Or maybe after I've read Brimstone, I won't even want to do that. But unfortunately, Quicksilver's a scrap. This is unprecedented. I did not foresee us having 2 scraps in the middle of this episode. I really thought that this would be an episode of just endless shelves and me slowly spiraling into madness because I can't bring the episode to conclusion. But it's played out very differently than I thought that it would. So for our next book, which in theory could be our last, I now have options, many more options than I thought that I would. So in the stacks behind me, we do have a couple of books. I know one for sure that I don't feel like picking up right now is Rose in Chains by Julie Soto. I think at the minute I'm all romanticed out. I don't want anything that is overtly romantic. So we're not going to be picking up that one. I do also have Catabasis. This was on Emily's list and also Sandra's. That is like R.F. Kuang's take on a romantasy, but I know for sure that the way that R.F. Kuang is writing a romantasy is not in the way that everybody else is. So tonally, I do think it would be very different. Aaron recommended The Book That Wouldn't Burn by Mark Lawrence, which I'm pretty sure is in here somewhere, because she made me put it here, right? Did I put it back on the shelves? Oh no, it's right there. And I think that might be everything. I'm not feeling it, guys. I'm not feeling the selection that we have in front of us. So I might take it to the shelves actually, because if I were to give an award for the best book of 2025 as decided by Booktube, based on the research I did, which honestly is not enough to give a decisive award to anyone for anything, but there is one book that cropped up on multiple lists from the people that I follow. It was on Emily's list, once again, from Books with Emily Fox. It was on G's list from Book Roast. It was on Steph's list from Falling to Steph, and it was also on Kayla's list. So that's a lot of people with a variety of different reading tastes all loving this one book. And actually, if you look at Steph's list specifically, we had a lot of crossover last year from our favorite books of the year. So I feel like this could be one that I really enjoy, and it was the book that cropped up the most. And I don't feel like I can ignore that when I'm specifically doing a video reading Booktuber's best books of 2025. So I think that that's the one that we have to read. So let's go get it. While we're going up here, let me just give you a sneak peek of what's going on in here. So they're taking the toilet out literally every day so that they can carry on working on the bathroom. That's literally all we have in here right now. We also have the shower tray, but the tiles are all on the wall. They've done some of the grouting, and they're coming back to finish it tonight. We have the flooring in, and I'm really excited for this area because we're gonna have a built-in sink unit and a light up LED mirror here. And it's super echoey in here, but they said that they're gonna finish up the grouting. They've done this wall, but they haven't done this half of the room. They're gonna finish the grouting tonight, do all of the silicone ceiling, and tomorrow, allegedly, they're fitting the rest of the bathroom. So hopefully it won't be too long until I can have a shower in my own home, because I am tired of paying to go to the gym to exercise, because I might as well if I'm paying, but mainly just to shower. So the construction dust when they were cutting the tiles was much worse than I expected, as you can see illustrated here. So I had to dust cover my bookcase, but the book in question, I'm pretty sure is on these shelves. She's right there. Oh God, she's another chunky one. But it is The Raven Scholar by Antonia Hodgson. I've literally only heard really good things about this. So Booktube has spoken, and they have decided that this book is the best book of 2025. Now, I'll be honest, I only wrote down the books that was on everybody's best list that I personally own, so maybe there was something else on there that I just don't have. But this definitely cropped up the most, and she is chunky. I think it's another 600-ish page book, slightly bigger than Quicksilver. It's 643. So she's definitely a chunky one. I do think though the text is slightly larger, which is a treat. I feel like that font size has been creeping up gradually since the Book of Azrael, which literally you needed a magnifying glass for. I'll be honest though, I read the synopsis of this when I hauled it and I no longer remember anything about it. So we're gonna have to refresh ourselves. Oh, a competition. We love a competition. That also makes so much more sense why everybody's loved this one. Oh, murder mystery. I forgot about that element of this plot, and that might be a sticking point for me. We'll see though. I don't always hate it, but I also never reach for it. But this is essentially about an emperor who is bringing his reign to an end. He's reigned for 24 years, and so 7 contenders are going to compete to replace him. Each of them is inspired by a sacred animal, so I'm assuming that the one that we're mainly going to be following is the Raven Scholar, but one of the contenders is murdered, and then it falls to the brilliant but idiosyncratic Nima Craw to investigate. So potentially she is the Raven Scholar. Sounds interesting enough. I'm taking everyone's word for this. I'll be honest, the competition part really intrigues me, while the murder mystery does put me off a little bit. So I think it is a good job that this comes so well endorsed. Otherwise, I may have been putting this off for a long time. I wonder what the average rating is on Goodreads, just out of curiosity? It's a 4.44. That's incredible. I don't think that there's many books rated higher than that. That's insane. I am 200 pages into the Raven Scholar and I am loving it. This, by the way, is one of the protective dust jackets. This one in particular is from Fairy Loot. It's the first one that they included and I think it came in, was it the December box or was it the November one? It's a pretty recent one anyway and I like it. It's nice and squishy and I thought that the colours kind of went best with the sprayed edges on this, which I have to say, I don't know if the Illumicrate edition is my favourite edition of this book. I really like the Waterstone Shadow edition, but the thing that really sells me on this one in particular, the element of this that I like the most, it has really pretty end paper art, but it's actually, I mean, you guys know me. You know I love a naked hardcover. And this one is a sight to behold. This is a world where they worship 8 gods and each of the gods is an animal. This is the religion of the world. Not everybody believes it. It's actually like the common people who don't really fall in for it. But every 24 years at most, they have a competition to decide who the next emperor of the land is going to be. And each of the contenders is represented by one of these animals. So you have like a representative for the crow, the tiger, the hound, the monkey, bear, the ox, the fox, and the dragon, except the dragon doesn't usually compete. They don't desire the throne. That's what they say every time. And so they have somebody stand in as like their proxy that is usually from one of the other monasteries. We're following a woman called Nima Craw in here. She's 34 years old, so it's great to see somebody who's a little bit older. And she is essentially investigating the murders of the raven contender. Did I say the raven as one of the animals? Obviously the raven is an animal. That's what this book is about, but she's the high scholar for the emperor and it's coming up to the time, I can't remember whether he's done like a full 24 years service or whether he's abdicating for other reasons. I think it's just come to the end of his term. So they're holding this tournament once again. Nima is very close friends with one of the contenders, the one for the foxes. They used to be lovers. And the raven contender has been killed. So herself and also the fox contender, it's mainly her, have been tasked with finding out who murdered the raven representative, who I think is called Gator. We do have a lot more going on in here though. It is really difficult because I don't know how much to tell you about this book because there are things that definitely took me by surprise while I was reading it and I don't want that to be taken from you. I will say that Antonia Hodgson can write a villain. I don't know if they are going to be a villain, but already from very early on in here, we had an instantly dislikable character, more than one if I'm being honest, but one in particular who is also one of the contenders to be the next emperor, who is wildly disliked across the world. And I think that the way that I instantly disliked him reminded me a lot of Robin Hobb and the way that Robin Hobb can write such easily detestable characters. This is also giving me elements of Game of Thrones, and the thing in particular that's throwing it back to that for me is that there was a failed rebellion attempt that we find out about right at the beginning of this book. We essentially skip forward 8 years after the first 50 pages or so of this, but in the first little bit of this story we do learn that there was a failed rebellion, once again like 10 years before even that part of the book, and the person who attempted the rebellion is now known throughout this world as a traitor, but the person who came up to be the emperor at this time is somebody who did so reluctantly. They were a bear representative, and in taking control of this society they have tried to make it fairer for everyone. So previously, to be a contender to be emperor and to attend any of the monasteries that teach any of the practices of these animal gods, you had to be somebody who was highborn, and even people who were like middle class weren't included. Eventually it got a little better and it started to include the middle classes, but this emperor has really been a pioneer for the lower classes. And our main character Nima did grow up incredibly poor. She won her place on a scholarship, and while she is very bright, she's very good at what she does, she was an excellent student and she's doing a really great job now, a lot of people still look down upon her because of where she came from, and that is something that she is constantly having to fight against, and has created a lot of tension between her and a lot of people in this world. And there's also a prophecy that says that the 8 gods have been down to the world to assist the mortals 7 times to save the world. And if they have to return for an 8th time, then they are going to end everything. So people are very, very scared of the situation in this world getting so bad that the 8 gods have to intervene. And there is another part of the prophecy that says if blood is dripped onto a certain knife, then that is going to signal the return of the gods and therefore signal the end of the world. So all of these things are kind of working in conjunction with each other, which is giving me like the really strong basis that I crave for an epic fantasy. But I think that the pacing of this is excellent. It's just instantly compelling. The first couple of chapters, I didn't quite know what was going on. Obviously, I was thinking into it. But since then, since I've adjusted to the writing style, I am so absorbed and I'm loving this so much. Like every time I pick it up, I'm instantly into the story. I always say that the best stories for me are the ones where I can really picture what is going on. Like I can tell you some of the books that I've read, I can tell you how certain rooms from the book are laid out in my mind because they were so immersive, and this is given that. Like I'm in this story, I'm seeing it play out when I'm reading it, and not every book does that for me. And I think that that is where I can really struggle. If I'm not immersed, if I don't have that clear picture, then I find it really difficult to almost follow the story because I can't kind of navigate it with my brain. I'm trying to make the words form a picture, and if they don't form a picture, then they just don't, and I'm lost. So yeah, this is a joy and a delight so far. I'm really intrigued to see where it goes. I am feeling a little bit hesitant about being too enthusiastic about it because I've enjoyed all of the books that I've read for this episode. I really enjoyed when I was starting them, but obviously the last 2 took a little bit of a nosedive for me halfway through. I will say that at the point that I'm at, the murder mystery element of this has started, but it actually coincides quite nicely with the start of the tournament. So I feel like having the tournament to focus on kind of offsets the fact that it's a murder mystery, so that is not bothering me at all right now, and actually reminds me quite a bit of the Locked Tomb series by Tamsin Muir, which the first book is of course Gideon the Ninth, which is of course once again a tournament format with a murder mystery as the contenders. Like everyone's taking part in the tournament to become like the immortal warriors of maybe yet again an emperor, I think, but they're dying one by one and the main characters are trying to get to the bottom of who is responsible. So I have no notes, I have no complaints, and I'm doing sprints. So I'm just going to go and I'm going to continue reading this book, and I'll let you know if anything changes. I am 422 pages into this book now, and I'm still having a really good time. I'm loving it. And I feel like one of the reasons why this book is so compelling is because it is challenging my assumptions as a reader. Because obviously, like, I've read a lot of fantasy, and one of the reasons why things don't take me by surprise super often is because there's a lot of common patterns. There's a lot of common tropes and themes and story structures across genres, and it's why I have a much better time with genres like thrillers than I sometimes do with fantasy, because I'm not as familiar with the conventions of that genre, and I often see the threads of something that very closely mimics something that I've seen before, and so I kind of can predict how it's going to play out later down the line. But Antonia Hodgson is stopping me from being able to do that because she is challenging my preconceptions and my assumptions that I'm making about this story. So right at the beginning, we meet a character. We're reading kind of like from their perspective. I don't think it's first person, but we are very closely following this one person. Yeah, no, it's not first person. None of this book is. And we actually have an interesting narrator, which I'll talk about in a minute. But when you start a book and you're following a character, I feel like you automatically assume that that character is good, like they are the hero. And this obviously isn't like a blanket statement that you can apply to every book, but that does tend to be the case. So I feel like you automatically have your guard down a little bit. And then when you find out that the father of that character is a traitor and led a failed rebellion where they were executed, traitorted. And based on the fantasy that I typically read, my automatic assumption is that this traitor is rebelling against an unjust government, like he is in the right and that the government needs to be overthrown. And then when you meet a mother who is distraught over what happens to her child, I feel like you automatically assume that she is a good person because you meet her at her most vulnerable moment where she is showing a lot of emotion. But the more you get into this book, the more you realize that all of those blanks that your brain has filled in are incorrect and nothing is quite as it seems. And that is true of those three characters that I've just spoken about, but it's also true about so many other characters in this book. And I feel like this is where Antonia Hodgson's background as a crime writer is showing, because when I started this book, I was like, wow, I can't believe that this is an author who pretty much exclusively writes crime. And I don't know how much she's actually written, but I do know that Antonia Hodgson is known as being a crime writer. And I was like, this feels like so organically like a fantasy. And I don't read a lot of crime. It's actually a genre that I actively avoid because I grew up in a household where my mum only consumed crime stories, and I can probably give you, like, I truly grew up only consuming crime, and I can probably give you on one hand the amount of stories within that genre I have enjoyed. It's really not for me in television or book format, so I don't read the genre, but having been exposed to quite a lot of it, I do have some assumptions about it, and this to me does not read like a crime novel in any way, shape or form, which makes sense because it's a fantasy. But when you have an author who is so like deeply entrenched in the genre, I feel like you expect to be able to see a little bit of that in other work that they write, and I feel like I'm finally seeing where Antonia Hodgson's crime background is coming through in the way that she is very quietly leading me astray and then correcting me at a later date. And in reality, nothing Antonia Hodgson has done has led me to the conclusions that I have drawn. I have drawn those conclusions by myself, and Antonia Hodgson just never corrected me. And so when I'm corrected later down the line, it feels like a grand revelation when actually it's not. Like, I'm just having my own preconceptions challenged, and it's providing a more engrossing reading experience because I'm never being afforded the opportunity to become complacent. When I mentioned the narration style of this as well, I don't want to tell you who the narrator is, but we do have a narrator that is separate to the characters that we're following. We have like a bird's eye view of what's playing out, and this narrator is more closely following individual characters, but then sometimes we do zoom out and have these almost like aerial moments where we will then zoom in on one of the other contenders, because this is not like a multi-perspective book. We are predominantly following just the one character, I would say, but we do frequently maybe visit another one to get a little nugget of information, or the side character that's been looking especially suspicious. We'll get a chapter on kind of like their backstory and how they've ended up in this position. Above all else, I feel like this is constantly hooking my attention and drawing me into the narrative, which is something that I honestly really need. And my attention span is not what it was, which I've been quite transparent about in the past, and I'm like actively trying to bring it back a little bit. But books like this that are continuously hooking me back into the narrative and are compulsively readable also really help, and also make me think that like in some regard maybe I'm just not picking up the right books. And I don't know what the right books would be, because unless I'm sampling them, I don't really know what's going to hold my attention. But in terms of like keeping me hooked, this is definitely doing its job. The only times when I felt maybe disinterested in this book is actually when I've been really tired and reading, and I think that's more on me than it is the book. So far so good. I've still got 220 pages to go. It doesn't feel long. Like, I'm not ready for this book to be over. It doesn't feel like it's dragging on, and I'm definitely appreciating that as well, because for a 600-page book so far, it's been a dream to get through. And coming off the back of reading, like in January, I had, of the 7 books I read, 5 of them I think were over 500 pages. So coming off the back of a month of big books, this is the one that has truly felt like a breeze. And I wouldn't say it's the easiest read of the bunch either. It's just one where I'm so absorbed that it seems to be flying by. So I finished The Raven Scholar, and I'm so happy to say that I thoroughly enjoyed this one. I do think I am going to be rating it more of a 4.5, although I am going to be rounding that up to a 5-star. So it is my first 5-star read of 2026, which is great. And I'm so glad that we managed to find one in this video. But I think that this book very cleverly toes the line between a darker, more serious kind of fantasy and something a little bit more whimsical and humorous. And I do think in the last 10 to 15%, we had a little bit more of an uptick in that more unexplained or unknown kind of magic that is present in this world. And that, as we know, is not my personal preference when it comes to magic systems. So I'm mostly curious to see how this book follows through into its sequel, which I don't think we currently have a release date for, which is very sad, because this one obviously very closely followed the format of the tournament, like the contenders competing for the throne. And going into the sequel, it's going to stray away from that. And I'm wondering if we still have this more unexplained, like raw magic, whether that is going to affect my enjoyment when we break away from that very predictable and solid structure of a tournament. So obviously only time will tell in that regard, but there was so much that I really loved about this. I even really enjoyed the humor, which is always hit or miss for me, but I really liked the way that this lightened the mood while still following a more darker, serious storyline. And I really liked the character of Sol in here, which is kind of all I'm going to say on that. I did also like the character of Kane, who is one of the contenders, and he reminded me of a very Nikolai style character from the Grishaverse, who is one of my favorite character archetypes. And actually, Kane is the fox contender in this book, and they always call Nikolai like the too clever fox, I'm pretty sure, in the Grishaverse, so I feel like that definitely fits. This had little elements of Game of Thrones as well, which I did mention briefly before, but I think specifically the Emperor in here, I think he's called Bearson. He reminds, which is funny actually, because he is a bear warrior, so it literally, like, his name sounds like Bear Son, like son of a bear, which I've been thinking about while I've been reading this, and I'm wondering if that's intentional. But he reminds me so much of Robert Baratheon, both in the circumstances which he came to the throne and also the way that he's ruled in comparison to the people who have come before him and also the people who have tried to usurp him. And I also got like elements of Wicked in here from our main character Nima, and I actually think that that is a comparison that is like 2 steps removed, because the way that she is the Raven Scholar, like I can't remember what her actual official position is, but she is like a advisor to the Emperor. She reminded me a lot with the way that she's shunned, because she had a little bit of a less fortunate upbringing than those around her, and also with the way that she's allied to like the Ravens. She reminded me of the main character of Malice, but the Heather Walter Malice, not the John Gwyn one, who in turn kind of gives me alphabet energy. The Malice duology is, I didn't actually love that duology and I wouldn't recommend it, but it is like a Maleficent origin story, and a lot of that I feel like aesthetically feels very Elphaba coded, which I feel like has translated to this for me. So this was just like Elphaba running around in this world in my mind, if I'm being honest. But I do think it is the writing that won me over in this one. I loved the way that this was written. I loved the way that Antonio Hodgson was subverting my expectations regarding various characters, and that provided not necessarily the most shocking plot twists I've ever read, but things that constantly took me by surprise and kept me engaged throughout this. And I feel like while this is definitely a murder mystery, that is not the dominant part of this story, and I don't feel like it follows the structure of a murder mystery at all. I think that the murder is just a small mystery in a bigger picture that the main characters of this book are trying to unravel throughout the course of it. And I think that there's a lot about this atmospherically that reminded me of Godkiller by Hannah Kader as well. So if anything that I've said about this book sounds good, then I would definitely urge you to pick it up. For a thick book, I feel like it read quite quickly for me just because I was so engaged with it. And I feel like this was a fantasy story that I could really sink my teeth into, that was like multifaceted. We had a lot of complexity and intricacy within the characters and the plot. The magic system and the world I did really enjoy. There is just that one element of the way that the magic manifests romance that is traditionally not something that I love, but I think because I was captivated by pretty much everything else in this book, it's not too difficult for me to overlook that, and I'm so excited to pick up the sequel to this one, and I hope that Antonia Hodgson also writes more fantasy in the future. So, as you've probably guessed, this one is going to be a shelve, which, given where we got this from, is probably not going to be all that difficult. And this can go exactly where it came from, which is right back into this gap here. So that brings us to the end of episode 22, and I feel like we had some quite unexpected results for this one. In total, I read 4 books. I have had no DNFs in this episode, but I also haven't had any DNFs so far this year up until the point I'm filming this, pretty close to when the video has been posted. And I do feel like only prioritizing books that I'm more interested in and heavily invested in is definitely going to lower the amount of DNFs that we have going forward. So I'm interested to see how that affects like this project as well as my reading in general. I will say though that my thoughts on these were pretty unpredictable. I am shocked that the 2 scraps that we have here are the 2 romantices. I was sure that at least one of these was going to be one that I loved. Unfortunately, that was not the case. I do still think there is a lot to love about Quicksilver. I just don't have a level of investment in it where I need to keep this hardback specifically for no reason. And this one, unfortunately, fell flat for me after the 50% mark, and it started off so well. In terms of the shelves, I'm pretty sure I don't usually count books that I shelve that came off the shelves because nothing's really changed about them. So technically we only have 1 shelf for this episode, but both of these were ones that I enjoyed and will be keeping. I'm really glad that I enjoyed the Raven Scholar. I thought that I might because so many other people had loved it, but I didn't really know what to expect from this one. So I'm definitely glad it was a win for me, given that I was disappointed by the romantasy that I'd read in this episode. And the Ali Hazelwood, I'm pretty sure, was always going to be a shelf. Not a 5-star read, surprisingly, but still a win. We still love Ali. So that concludes episode 22. I feel like we didn't do too much damage to the stacks in this one, unfortunately, but I'm truly going forward not too worried about the stacks because I do think that 2026 is going to be the year that we conquer them. Down in my comments, let me know if you have any suggestions about how I should pick the amount of books that I read per episode going forward. I've had time, obviously, throughout the course of filming this to think about it, and I'm still not coming up with anything particularly exciting. Like, I have a couple of ideas, but nothing that's like revolutionary. So if you guys have any ideas, then I would love to hear them. I'm interested in keeping it down to a smaller amount for 2026, similarly to what we've done with this episode, but please share your thoughts if you have any down in my comments. And just as a benchmark, we are going to be ending this episode on 43 books in the stacks. And hopefully it shouldn't be any bigger than that, fingers crossed, when we start episode 23. For those of you who may be interested, the next vlog you see on my channel should either be a day in my life or a 24-hour readathon vlog. I'm pretty sure I'm going to be filming both of those very soon. I just don't know in which order they're going to fall, but stay tuned for that if you are at all interested. And aside from that, guys, I hope you've enjoyed this vlog if you've made it this far. If you have, please don't forget to like if you liked it and subscribe if you wanna, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye.
Oh, you bite your friend like chocolate. You say you will go where nobody knows, with guns hidden under our petticoats. We're never gonna quit it, no, we're never gonna quit it, no.